Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Govs on the Go Alumni Edition, a podcast featuring alumni from the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. My name is Dr. Buzz Hoon. I'm the dean of the college. I'm also the host of the podcast. And today I'm talking with Reggie Edelmann, who graduated with a degree in communication arts back in 1989. Reggie, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about the communication arts degree and what it was from Austin Peay back in the 80s. But we're going to start with what's going on in your life. Can you give everybody a life update? Where are you? What's going on?
Well, a lot of people that I went to college with remember me as Reggie Edelmann. I got married later in life and became Reggie Edelmann. And I have returned to Clarksville after nearly 35 years of being gone. And with my husband, we have grown children, often living their lives. And I decided to be here kind of centrally located, close to family and old friends.
That's awesome. And we're going to kind of go about, because, you know, there's so many different connections that you had here, not only at Clarksville and Austin Peay, but also to Tennessee. You went away and with maybe the idea that those are in my rearview mirror and here they are, they're back again. We're going to talk about how all those things connect and how funny life can be about that. But let's go back to your origins. And I think, you talk about your connections, that your dad was in the Navy and living in different parts of the U.S. What kind of things, looking back now, that you say early on, I had some early influences, and what were they?
Being in a military family, that's a whole different world. And a lot of people here in Clarksville can relate with Fort Campbell nearby. I was fortunate where I came in. When I came in the world, my dad was more landlocked in San Diego for most of my early childhood. So a lot of my influences in my childhood kind of came from living in Southern California. What was the rest of that question?
So, yeah, what kind of, what did you, as a young Reggie, what did you like to be involved with?
Okay. So my dad was a closet musician. He didn't bring it out much, kind of more private. We would often see him in the living room conducting. He had the reel-to-reel. This was in the late 60s, early 70s. And one of his favorite music pieces to conduct to was Camelot. So I would often just sit sort of off, because he didn't like people watching, and enjoy it myself. So I always admired that. He played the trumpet, and later on I learned he had all learned to play the piano, but I didn't know that in my early childhood. I learned that in my teens when he actually rented a piano and had me and my younger brother learn the piano a little bit. So that was a big influence. My older brother also played an instrument at that time, and I would go to his school concerts. He played the trumpet and picked up on his own the bass guitar. So he was in jazz band and he was in concert band. So I'd often go to his high school performances. So that's how music came in. But it also came in, it reminds me of this little record player I had, and I had 45s, those little 45 records, and I'd play them all the time, and I would make I'd write out these variety shows, because in those days, variety shows were big on TV. We had the Sonny and Cher.
Yeah.
You had Donnie and Marie, and you had Laugh, and you had a lot of shows that were variety shows. So me and a couple of my neighborhood friends in San Diego, we would write up variety shows, skits, singing, It was really fun, and we put it on for our neighbors. So that was an influence. The other thing is we had an annual trip to Disneyland, which was about an hour and a half away from our house. So Disney was a big part of my life, and I had several 45s of Disney songs. So music has always been a part of me for many reasons. It's sort of an escape when things were hard. It's also an expression. But in my early years, I never picked up an instrument, but I certainly was surrounded by music.
That's really cool. And it's funny that those early influences, stuck around with you for in different ways, and we're going to talk about how you've even picked up some of that even as you move back. But what kind of things did you like to do in high school, and how did you get? Because I think you moved at some point in time to the Clarksville area.
Yes. So from San Diego, my father and my brothers and he had gone through a divorce and retired from the Navy, and he worked for a Navy contractor in Maryland. So we ended up in Maryland during my 8th grade through 12th grade years. And when I arrived in Maryland, I showed up for the first day in this middle school, some rural middle school, so different than San Diego. And I said, I want to join band. So the band, a girl on the bus was in band. My first friend, she played the sax. Says, I want to play sax. I want to be in the band. And there were too many sax players. So the band director suggested the flute. So my dad went to the local music store, rent to own a flute for me, real cheap little Bundy flute. And I joined band in the 8th grade, not even ever picking up an instrument before. So that's how music started in school. I was also involved in the arts. I love to draw. Later on, I was an art major at Austin Peay for a little while too. And then when I went over to high school, again, I stayed in band, but I call it social intelligence. I really liked to encourage people. So I became a cheerleader. And the side note is my husband now, he was on the football team then. So
really?
We got reacquainted 30 years later. I was a cheerleader. He was a football player. It's just a funny little story. We met when we were 14. So it was really influential. Music was just a big part of my life. And high school was hard. Those were hard days. My father had divorced, and my mother had some struggles, and my older brother had some struggles, and he eventually went into the Marines. So it was a hard time. So the arts, which mainly was music, was sort of the thing that cheered me up and kept me going. So I remember that a lot about high school. I did, for a short period of time, come to Clarksville during my senior year to live with my mother, her husband, my father and mother were from Wisconsin. Her husband at the time worked for Train, was transferred to Clarksville.
Okay.
Just shortly before I came to live with them, and I went to Northeast High School and was in the band there as well. And I stayed here for a little while, but I wanted to go graduate from the high school I had been in. So I returned back to Maryland. But after I graduated, I came back to Clarksville.
I'll be. And, after high school, you mentioned that you were considering whether or not you should join your brother and follow the military route. But
that's right.
Luckily for us, you chose Austin Peay. But there must have been a, as we say, a fork in the road where it was a real life decision for you.
Well, I didn't have a family. Maybe the background we had, they didn't prepare us for college. College was not even, if you got in college, it was on your own. Right. And so when I came to Clarksville, I worked at a drugstore because I didn't have any money to go to college. And I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do. I worked at Revco. It used to be on Madison Street where the Goodwill is. I used to walk there from near the Wilma Rudolph. Used to be a pool golf course down there. I also was a lifeguard. here in Clarksville in those years, and just tried to figure it out. But my brother was re-enlisting and he was visiting at the time. So he took me to the recruiting office. I didn't know what else to do with my life. I didn't know how I could get to college. So this seemed like a good opportunity. And so the recruiter suggested I audition for the Marine Corps band program. And I said, well, I always wanted to be really good at something. So I went to Nashville, I auditioned, I got accepted. I went to, I took the physical, took the oath, signed the papers. I was about to go to Ellis Island for boot camp when during the time I had to wait between signing the papers and going to boot camp, somebody told me to go to Austin P. They have financial aid, which I didn't remember learning about financial aid in high school. High school then didn't have as many resources to get kids in college as they do now. So I filled out the application and I got a loan to go to college. So I had to go to Nashville and request an honorable discharge from the Marines before I even went. So it's just a funny story because the flute was what was directing me even at that time in my youth, trying to figure out what to do. So after high school, I worked a year and I started Austin P in 1983, the fall of 1983.
And of course, your major was the one you graduated with, so. No.
That wasn't my first major.
Which I think is an important story for all of our students to hear, that there are oftentimes, that's part of the learning process, is finding out really where your talents are. So what was your major? I'm interested.
Well, when I started, I was undeclared.
Okay.
I was taking core classes, but I did join the band. I think the band was a sense of community for me.
Sure.
Moving around a lot as a military child and then in a divorced family, you couldn't really build community outside in your neighborhood because it changed so often. But something about musicians and music built community. So I joined the band and met a lot of people in band that I'm still friends with who still are around here doing music. It's really kind of neat to learn that. And it just depended on who I became friends with. So I joined a sorority. Again, I needed community. So the sorority experience, it was Alpha Delta Pi. It was their first recruitment year. They were brand new. And I worked on, so I got a work study job to give me a little bit of money. I lived on campus and I ate on campus and I worked on campus to make a little bit of money to buy my membership to pay my membership dues for the sorority. And that was a good choice too. Again, a sense of belonging. So during that time, I was taking classes, meeting people. I met a wonderful friend, Karen Gleichman, and she was an art major. And I was like, I love art. I used to draw all the time when I was a kid. So Karen was amazing. So I started signing up for art classes. I'm going to be a graphic design major. So for about a year and a half, I was taking art classes. It was wonderful. So I got really absorbed in Austin Peay's art program. So this little state school has extraordinary talent in their professors and in their students. And even back then, all the well-known art professors, Hofstetler and Bruce, I'm trying to think of Bruce's last name. We call him by his first name, graphic art professor. So I really felt privileged to be in the midst of these greats at Austin Peay. And they had a wonderful art resource area. It was in the Traherne at that time.
Right.
And everything was done by hand. And one fond memory of that is toward the end, before I changed my major, they brought in the Apple computer. It was the little screen. It was brand new. We used to do everything by hand. Yeah. They brought in the Apple computer and they started showing all the things it could do. Oh my gosh, we were all like, our heads were exploding. So, but I realized, and I really thank the professors for letting me know, if you want to make a career of art, you've got to be competitive. So I realized that I wasn't going to be able to cut it as an artist and make a living. So I had to think of another plan, but I'm really grateful for all of the art classes that I had.
That's a great transition into, for a student to feel like what they have learned is still useful, because you stayed in the right college, thankfully. And I don't know if it was the College of Arts and Letters back then, but the fact that you transitioned into eventually the communicative arts degree, which I think would have been perfect for you, because you had experiences both in theater, and also you were such a wonderful communicator, a natural communicator, that those must have been really good classes for you.
They were. I sort of stumbled in the communication degree area by some of the experiences I had prior to making that decision. I needed scholarship money. One way I got grant money, so I didn't have all loans, is the president of the university, President Riggs' wife, Dr. Riggs, Judy Riggs. She brought the sorority on campus. She set me up with the financial aid director, so I got to meet him again. And they helped me find a way to get grants. So I had some loans and grants. So my loans got smaller, got more grants.
Oh,
then I was told about the Miss Austin P State University pageant. Now, I'd only been in one pageant. Well, I was in Ferris to the Fair briefly when I first moved here, just because I had friends in it. I did okay, didn't win, but it was fun. But I was in Miss Northeast High my senior year, my first pageant ever. Oh, it was so clumsy, and it was fun. And I played the flute. I got 4th runner-up, ecstatic, thought that I, won the lottery. It was really fun. I'm friends with several of those ladies in that pageant, by the way, still. So when I was at Austin P, I was taking flute lessons. I was in music classes early on, or the band. So I signed up because there was a scholarship involved, a $2,000 scholarship even in that day. So that was really hefty. And I borrowed clothes for the pageant. Somebody bought me an evening gown for that pageant. A family, a friend of the my mother bought me. So it took. I didn't do any of this on my own. It took so much support from other people for these opportunities that I had, that helped steer me and direct me. And I played my flute, worked on a piece from my flute teacher, said, play this and I'll give you an accompanist and go play it out there. Dean, you and I talked earlier about when you're young, you're a bit fearless.
Yeah.
You don't realize what you're doing. You're just focused, like, I want to do that. And you don't think about all the other things. I'm so glad I was fearless because I won. And this is 1985.
That is awesome. And, that shows, again, your own personal growth, which I see so often in our students, that you keep putting yourself out there, you keep challenging yourself into this new area, and that was really cool. And that led me to, I think, when I was looking over all your information, I said, have you always been good at everything that you've done? And I don't mean to. I know it takes a lot of you put a lot of your own work into all these things.
Yes, that took a lot of work. I knew that you didn't have to be great at one thing. I knew that it's more of what you're, kind of following your heart. And if your heart's in something, it shows. You don't have to be the best, but if you have your heart in it, there's something that connects with other people. And I think that was my pearl buttons, as they say in acting class. That was something I had. I didn't necessarily have the best talent.
Mm-hmm.
I was a very shy girl. So even to be in those interviews in those days and being on stage, it took a lot of courage and, yes, a lot of practice to do those things. And I was a lifeguard, so the swimsuit wasn't an issue in those days for me. I was I worked in a swimsuit. It was no big deal. But the neat thing about Miss Austin Peay State University is when I was a little girl in San Diego, I used to watch the Miss America pageant. I remember when I was 6 years old, my dad knew how much I liked the pageant. I got a Halloween Miss America costume. It was so cute. You know, those little masks, those little paper-like masks, and those really cheap dress-like costumes in those days. And then the next year, the Miss America Barbie came out. So my dad had bought me a Miss America Barbie, and this is like 6 and 7 years old. Fast forward, I'm in Miss Austin Peay, and I get word that it goes to Miss Tennessee. I don't know what that means. Well, after I won, you go to Miss Tennessee. That goes to Miss America. I went, what? You mean I'm going to be able to go compete in that Miss America system? So that was very exciting. And the Miss Austin Peay before me, student Sharon Bell, now Sharon Burkhart, she loaned me all her clothes from the year before. She had been in it and she was runner-up both times. She didn't win, but she was definitely someone who helped me learn the whole pageant,
Wow.
the whole pageant system, and then let me wear her clothes the year I competed as Miss Austin Peay State University. And that year, because of all that support, I was second runner-up that year. This was 1985.
So that must have been encouraging to you that this is something you should continue to do.
Well, what I started to realize, which sometimes only if you put yourself out there do you even know what you're capable of, is I was speaking to a lot of people. I was performing. I was being an ambassador for the university. I also got more scholarship when I went to Miss Tennessee. And what I realized is when I was around people that I just loved interacting with people, especially children, in that capacity, something about a crown, but in that capacity, I realized that there's something there that I want to explore. So that helped me kind of shift into the communication area and broadcast journalism.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit let's get you back in the classroom. What other professors did you have that helped you both in theater and in broadcasting? Who do you remember?
Well, Von Palco was there back then.
Okay.
He was pretty new, and the radio station had just been put on campus. This was like the second year, but that's a little later. So when I first went into communications, I was doing a lot so, you know,
Taking a big bite of the apple.
I know, because here I was. Well, I was doing community theater. I had done a Fort Campbell dinner theater in my 18, 19-year-old years. And then I was at the Roxy when I was 20, when that opened up. I did a show there. So I was starting to meet a lot of artistic people at Austin Peay. And so because having a communication degree said you can take an elective, and one of the electives was an acting class. So I took an acting class, and they had a guest artist. They were raising money for the Center of Excellence back then. It was just starting. This was in 1986. And they were just starting the Roy Acuff Center of Excellence. And they brought in a guest artist acting teacher from New York City. Her name was Jackie Berger. So I took classes from a real New York actress. Wow. Oh my gosh, that just opened up my mind. That was amazing. And during that time, she had a lot of connections in New York. And there's one story, little nugget of a story that Austin Peay can be proud of. Jackie was friends of the playwright who wrote the play Nuts that became a movie that Barbara Streisand was in. But before it even made it to Broadway, Jackie, the acting teacher, brought it to Austin Peay, got several of the staff, the professors, Dr. Filippo even, he was there then. He's retired now, but what an amazing teacher. And many students, and we all did cold reading. We did it, we practiced it, and then we performed it for the community. And that was before it became famous and got all the awards on Broadway, and there was a movie made of it. So that was kind of neat that Jackie brought in this playwright. But also at Austin Peay, because of the Center of Excellence, and they really wanted to start with a big bang, Jackie got the next fall, a famous playwright by the name of Arthur Kopit to come and produce and direct a theater program, something that could get Austin Peay a lot of attention. So that came the next fall. So I was still taking communication classes. Gocher, Dr. Gocher.
Gocher. Mm-hmm.
Gocher. It was before he got his doctorate. Mike Gocher and his wife, they were professors, and he was an amazing speech teacher, I recall. I definitely got a lot from him that helped me along my educational path and even for Miss Tennessee. But the theater department was really dynamic in those days that I was there.
Wow.
I would tell you more, but I'm waiting for you to ask me more, so I don't want to.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm a little bit amazed because you're in your short time in college. Well, you said you took a little bit of extended time, which is, I understand now why you did that, because what weren't you doing during your time as an Austin Peay student?
Yeah. So on that note, the next fall, Arthur Kopit came. He's this wild, crazy, out of the box New Yorker playwright. And they have this idea to put on this production for the Bell Witch legend.
Okay.
They didn't know exactly what it would be, but they wanted to do something really artsy that would get the university a lot of attention. So Jackie invited me to participate in that. I didn't think I would be good enough, or, I just did a little community theater. I didn't do theater at Austin Peay yet, just acting class. But I was invited to participate in this program. Now, that fall, I had just won another preliminary pageant in Brownsville, Tennessee, that goes to Miss Tennessee, because in those days you could only compete twice to try to win Miss Tennessee, which goes to Miss America. So I had won a preliminary, and I was working also to go to Miss Tennessee that following summer. So this is the fall of '86 that Arthur Kopit came, and then the summer of '87 is when I returned back to Austin Peay. So this year, '86 to '87, was so transformative for me at Austin Peay State University. In the theater department, the music department, it was a transformative year. So this Bell Witch legend, have you heard?
Of course, it's and the fact that they still do, the spirit play here, which is, from my understanding, kind of came out of that project.
Yes, I heard that too. I haven't seen it yet. So what Arthur Kopit brought is this new theater experience, and it was process theater, so to speak. So we researched the legend, students being we, for several months, and we would improv. We would do lots of improvisation to sort of consider the era, what was going on in the time of the Bell Witch. This is such great theater education. Also writing education. We would research it. We would try things out. We would try different roles, different actors, so that everyone felt they could participate. We went out to the live farm. I can't remember this. Some settlers from the 1800s. There's a place you can go near here.
Adams.
I don't know if it's not Adams, but there's a I think it's in Kentucky, where they reenact the 1800s. Oh, okay. So we went there. What was it like to live in those times? And I remember one specific experience that was really cathartic as an aspiring actress. David Alford, who's the one who ended up writing Spirit, and I met him during this project. He and I were given the task to go to Nashville and go to their archives and look up the minutes of the church in Adams that the Bell family attended. Because in the legend book, it alludes to some things, but it doesn't go into detail. So David and I were researching the details of the Bell family, and we discovered that John Bell, the father of Betsy Bell, was excommunicated from the church. Now, that's huge in that time, because all these things related to why this legend came about, what was going on in Adams at the time that they thought this evil spirit was in the town. So that was exciting. And then the next semester, they had quarters in those days, so it was winter quarter. Arthur brought in specialists from New York, Marlo Thomas as an actress. She came and talked to us as actors, and we did this amazing performance. And it was improvisational mostly. And there was gauze for walls. People walked around the stage. All this lighting created different dynamics. And Arthur would come around and whisper in our ear and tell us the direction he wanted us to go. And we went. We had no scripts. So that I learned that David Alford went on from that experience and created something wonderful for Adams and Clarksville and Austin Peay. That's the power of education at Austin Peay.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
So not only do you get to have that experience, but then take us to Miss Tennessee. How did that happen?
So I think the theater experience I had and the music teacher. So at the time I'm studying in the music department, which was in the Clement in the basement. And my flute teacher was Lloyd B. King. He was also a special guest professor. He was a jazz flutist from Chicago. He also played classical, showed everyone he could, but he's mainly jazz. He helped me become more expressive as a musician. So I was taking lessons with him, preparing this competition piece for Miss Tennessee. So the first time I went to Miss Tennessee as Miss Austin Peay, I played a sonata, a classical piece. It was very nice. Sure. The second time I went, Lloyd B. King and another graduate student, Paul Binkley, helped put together a jazz gospel medley for me to play at Miss Tennessee, because it's the audience. You have to appeal to the audience. So we did this amazing arrangement, and they helped me put the performance together. I also worked with a flutist in Memphis that I had met during my training for Miss Tennessee. And so after this amazing experience with the Bell Witch, it was called Bell Witch Variations, and Arthur Copit and Jackie Berger and these fellow students, I then was going to compete in a couple more weeks in the Miss Tennessee pageant. And I contribute a lot of my confidence, a lot of my my courage to take that risk to what I was doing at Austin Peay. In the theater department, in the communications department, and in the music department. And all of that came together and it gelled and magic happened. And I just happened to win that year.
That must have been, you must have been out of your mind in terms of the fact that you are now in the Miss USA, the Miss America pageant.
It is the Miss America in those days.
Miss
USA. Yeah, Miss USA was a different thing without talent competition. But for someone who was so shy, didn't think she was really good at anything, here I am. And even, my clothes were all borrowed the first year. My flute was borrowed when I was Miss Austin Peay. So when I won the preliminary to go back to Miss Tennessee, I bought a flute from a studio musician in Nashville. So I now had a flute. I rented my clothes. A family donated an evening gown and the swimsuit. And so it was because of other people that I got there. That was definitely something that I've always been so grateful for, and encourage others, is you can have a dream and not have any idea. You can have a dream at 6 years old and not have any idea how you're going to get there. And there you are standing on the stage under the neon Miss America sign going, oh my God, how did this happen? So what I would tell students in that scenario is don't be afraid to dream big, because you don't know all the things that can come into place just by taking that first step. And with that first step showed me the next step. And with that next step, then the next step showed up. And then people started showing up and helping. And again, I know it had a lot to do with my education at Austin Peay that prepared me to be on that stage, compete, and really feel like I had something to offer as an ambassador to the state of Tennessee, and then show up at Miss America.
and that's a wonderful testimony to the legacy that has been existent here at Austin Peay since the 80s, when you were, and I know there was even before that, but you are evidence of that sort of legacy and how it exists. And I know that we're running out of time, because I wanted to just give a little bit of a wrap. You've had different phases within your life. You went to California. You were you were an actress, and you were in different things over that period of time. What did you think you learned about yourself?
Well, the interesting thing is I took Austin Peay with me. My first 2 roommates were Austin Peay students. My first interview with an agent at a major talent agency was from a contact at Austin Peay. Yeah. So that helped me get there. And what I would say is follow your dreams. You don't know the possibilities of what'll show up. I remember at Miss America, one of the judges said to me when I put on my resume that I wanted to be an actress, but my plan B was broadcast journalism. And that judge said, you can't have a plan B. And now I don't know about that, but I still felt confident to at least try, to go out there and take a chance, learn about it. There's so many things you don't know. You have a dream, go for it. You're going to learn so much along the way. It's not so much the destination that's the true gift. It's the journey toward something, toward a goal. And yes, I was very fortunate to have some amazing acting teachers in California. I had a good job at a law firm. Well, my first job was a tour guide at Universal Studios. That was a dream. So that was really fun, but it wasn't paying my rent. So I got a job at a law firm as a clerk, which was flexible. So I could go to auditions, and I could afford classes. I could afford my rent. I could afford to eat, at least month to month anyway. And that was so exciting. I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about the entertainment industry. Yeah. And I learned so much about other things too. It exposed me to so many other things that eventually led to a pivot in my life into spiritual studies, healing arts, and eventually, after becoming a mother and realized how much I love little kids, a school teacher, a public school teacher. And so I ended up in South Pasadena at a public school teaching kindergarten through 5th grade. Oh my God, I had no idea how much I would love that career. And so when my son graduated college, it was time for me to pivot again and make a new plan. Then COVID hit. So that was more information that help me figure out a new plan. Mm-hmm. And through that, we realized how much family was important, and that my husband and I had the resources to be there for family. And Clarksville was centrally located. And we sold our condo in San Diego and bought a house here in Clarksville, sight unseen, with a sorority sister of mine from Austin Peay, Susan Durrett Nicholson. And we landed here. It was supposed to be part-time, but my husband's, again, magic happens. My husband's company was sold during the time we bought this house, and they had to a company that had an office in Nashville. So we ended up here full time, and it's been a homecoming ever since.
I'm sure so many people were so happy to have you back in town, because you are like a light sometimes. I mean, yeah, this just the fact that there must have been some old friends you got to see again, like you said, people even that you went to high school with.
Well, I call it 1 degree of separation of all of Clarksville. The community we bought a house in, I didn't know who the neighbors were. The first day I arrived, a neighbor comes walking out their door, waving at me, saying, "Reggie!" And little did I know, my neighbor was Fred Landis, who I knew when I was at Austin P, because I was Miss Austin P. He was the big banker at the time who did a lot of work with Austin P. And we knew we crossed paths many times when I was in college, and there he's my neighbor. Also, another neighbor came by, stopped her car in front of my door, and she comes out and she says, "I knew your mother." My mother has passed since. And she was a dear friend of mine. And she said, "And if there's anything you need, just let me know, because everybody needs a mama." So that was Susan Durrett Nichols' mother. Susan Durrett Nichols' father is the one who bought me my first pageant dress. So like I said, it's all connected. Something about Clarksville, something about Austin P. It just really builds these connections, and they last.
Yeah. And they brought you back in.
Yes, they did.
We always like to end the podcast with you've already given some great recommendations for our students, but I always like to give the opportunity. Is there some other nugget that you want to share with students about? You've already given so much, but what do you think?
Well, I did write down a couple of things when we were preparing for this podcast. And one, I'll just read a couple of them.
Yeah.
One is that some dreams really do come true. So don't be afraid to dream. And be open to how they show up. Because when you're dreaming, you don't always see in full color. You just see what you know. You don't see all the other possibilities that could be out there as well. The other, on that note, take risks, but before you do, establish and nurture some guardrails to protect your body, mind, and spirit. I'm really glad I did that, especially when I moved out to Los Angeles. It is the city of angels. And what I tell people when they ask me about my experience there, I said, well, it's the dark angels and it's the light angels. There's a lot out there, and I was there in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was a scary time. But I'm so glad, getting all excited, that I had some guardrails, that I knew where I wanted to go, and I knew that if you don't venture out too far in the weeds. In a city like that, there's a lot of drugs, a lot of excess, a lot of ego, a lot of celebrities, centralism. So if you have guardrails, you can definitely direct yourself and stay whole, stay centered, stay well throughout your journey in that kind of fields. I'm specifically speaking to the College of Arts and Letters, all these creative folks. Your guardrails are your guardrails. You make them you make them for yourself, and hold on to them really tight, because they'll be tested. So that's another thing I would share with students. And it's okay to pivot, because magic happens anyway. If you go for a dream, you kind of make some strides. You might not make some level of success that maybe, other people have in mind for you, or even what you see in the media or you see in your field. But if something along the way directs you to pivot, like me having a child, discovering motherhood and children and getting all excited, using all my creative skills and my administrative skills into teaching, magic happens. I had so many magical moments with these kids that utilize all of what I learned at Austin Peay and throughout my experience in the creative arts, as well as the law firm and the healing arts. So just be open, but have guardrails, because anything is possible.
And what I really appreciate, not only you being on the podcast, Reggie, is the fact that I see you on campus. You are still connected to Austin Peay and the College of Arts and Letters.
Yes, I did a brave thing. I had a gap in my music education. I learned mostly by ear and imitation. I could barely read music. And I knew that I wanted to find my way back. I wanted to fill that gap because it was another dream of mine. And my husband and I are at a place, our children are grown. And again, we're living in Tennessee, not expensive Southern California. And we could afford for me to go study music for a little while. And it's been really scary, and it's been absolutely wonderful at the same time. So yes, I'm back on campus, and I volunteer for my sorority, the one that gave me a community when I didn't have one. I helped them renovate their townhouse. So it's been a joy to get reconnected that way too.
Well, it's an honor to have not only the former Miss Austin Peay and also the former Miss Tennessee on the podcast, the first ever for us. It's been fun talking with you, Reggie.
You too, Buzz.
Thanks to all of our viewers and listeners out there for checking out the podcast. We hope that you will join us as we continue to profile some of the outstanding alumni we have here in the College of Arts and Letters at Austin Peay State University. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and God bless.